Hey there, my friend. I'm genuinely thankful you've chosen to watch this video, and if you feel inclined to subscribe to the channel, know that it would mean a lot to me. Now, let's get started. I should have paid attention to the quiet tension in my wife's face the moment he stepped through our front door. My name is Caleb Warren, and until that evening, I thought I had a solid grasp on what it meant to trust someone. Alyssa, my wife, had always been the embodiment of warmth, steady, affectionate, and reliable. Ours wasn't an adventurous life, but it was one I could count on. We had our little habits: coffee together at 7:30 a.m., laundry every Saturday, date nights every other Friday. It was the kind of predictable rhythm that made betrayal feel like something that happened to other couples, those who didn't pay attention. And then Logan Carter came along. Things began to shift the day I transferred departments and met him at orientation. He had that effortless charm people are drawn to. Logan carried himself with confidence that never felt smug. At first, we made small talk, but before long, we were lunch buddies, trading fantasy football jokes and winding down with darts at O'Leary's. He wasn't just a coworker, he quickly became the closest friend I'd had in years. One evening, I suggested we all get together. A double date. Alyssa lit up at the idea. "It's been so long since we had company," she said with genuine enthusiasm. She even baked her signature rosemary focaccia and lit candles, just like she used to when we were newlyweds. But the entire atmosphere shifted when Logan walked in with his wife, Elena. Alyssa's reaction wasn't dramatic, but it was telling. Her fingers clung to the chair for a moment too long. She drew in a sharp, silent breath. Then came the smile. Too perfect, too staged. I knew that smile. I'd spent years with the real one. "Welcome, Elena." "Logan," she said, her voice bright but strained. We all sat down, and I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the wine hit harder than usual. But throughout the evening, she wouldn't look Logan in the eye. Her laughter at his stories was brittle, like something she had to force out, as if she were trying to bury something beneath the surface. When they left, I asked gently, "You okay?" "You seemed not quite yourself." She brushed it off. "Got a little dizzy earlier, that's all." I nodded, but something inside me refused to accept that. In the weeks that followed, our social circle began to include Logan and Elena more often. BBQs, long chats over wine, game nights. But my attention stayed fixed on Alyssa. I noticed how she dodged Logan's name, like it was forbidden. How her eyes drifted away whenever he walked into the room. How her smiles toward Elena carried more guilt than warmth. I didn't confront her. I didn't want to sound paranoid. So I waited. And I watched. Then came the morning Alyssa told me she had a dentist appointment before heading into work, just a regular cleaning. I kissed her like usual. But an hour later, I passed Logan's desk. It was empty. I made a casual comment to my manager. "Oh, Logan?" "He's out for a dental appointment this morning," he said. The words froze me in place. I spent the rest of the day staring blankly at my monitor, my thoughts spinning. Maybe it was just coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. Later that week, over lunch, I asked Logan where he grew up. "Bayshore," he said. My chest tightened. Alyssa was from Bayshore, too. That night, I brought it up casually. "Ever bump into anyone from your high school days?" I asked. She kept her eyes down. "Not really. No one I stay in touch with," she said too quickly. In that moment, I was certain. She was keeping something from me, and I was sure it had to do with him. But a suspicion wasn't enough. I needed something real. So I kept talking to Logan, listening carefully, collecting details. One night, he chuckled and said, "Back when I was 17, I dated this girl named Allie." Total wild card, gorgeous but impossible to read. My hand tightened around the arm of the chair. "Allie?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He nodded, not picking up on anything. "No idea what happened to her." I smiled on the outside. On the inside, I already had a theory, but I said nothing. Back home, I started checking Alyssa's phone while she was in the shower. There was nothing, no texts, no suspicious apps. It was spotless, too spotless. Then it all started to come apart. Alyssa said she had another appointment and that she'd head to work afterward. I said goodbye, called in sick, and drove to her office. I parked nearby and waited. An hour later, I saw her, not coming from work, but from a cafe down the street. And Logan was right there beside her. They weren't touching. They weren't smiling, but they didn't have to be. I stepped out of the car and walked straight over. Alyssa froze when she saw me. "Caleb," she said, startled. "I thought you were—" "You told me you had an appointment," I cut in. "I did," she said quickly. "That's not true," I replied. She glanced at Logan, then back to me. "It was just coffee." I turned to him. "Is that the truth?" He opened his mouth, then shut it again. That told me everything I needed. I didn't storm off. I didn't shout. I just walked away. Quiet, resolute. I knew what I saw wasn't the conclusion. It was the first page of something new. That night, I lay next to her, listening to her breathing, wondering how many lies had been whispered between those steady rhythms. She didn't explain, didn't offer a word of apology. Maybe she thought I'd let it go, blame it on stress, pretend it didn't happen. But the man who once believed trust was unbreakable no longer existed. The next morning, I went through the motions, showered, made breakfast, kissed her on the forehead before leaving. I didn't mention a thing. I wanted her calm. I needed her unaware. Because a gut feeling wasn't enough. I needed evidence. I contacted Jordan Tate, an old friend, a former detective who now ran a private investigations firm in Denver. We hadn't spoken in years, but as soon as he heard my voice, he said, "Who cheated?" That was Jordan. Straight to the point. 2 days later, he had a strategy. Track their movements, monitor online activity, recover any deleted data if possible. Quietly, without raising alarm. At home, I kept playing the part. Alyssa and I ate dinner together. She even laughed once. Nervous laughter, like someone struggling to stay above water. I didn't interrogate. I observed. Her new routines. Her sudden interest in makeup again. The perfume she had stopped using months ago now dabbed freshly on her wrists each morning. Then came Jordan's call. "It's not just coffee," he said flatly. "They've met 5 times this month. Hotels, daytime bookings, same pattern, same room." My mouth went dry. "Room 418, he added. "Last Thursday, 2 hours. I've got the footage if you want it." I didn't need to see it. I already knew the truth. But I asked him for something else. "Can I play the recording?" I asked. Jordan hesitated. "You mean you want to hear them talk?" "Not exactly," I said. "I want her to hear herself." Things were already in motion. The momentum was irreversible. I waited patiently for our next conversation, her next fabricated excuse. She mentioned a lunch with an important client, someone with deep pockets, she claimed, as she combed her hair in front of the mirror. I just nodded, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and left. I was at the hotel an hour ahead of schedule. Jordan had rigged the suite. The audio streamed directly to my phone. She arrived at 12:37. He followed just minutes later, 12:45. They didn't leave until 2:06. I sat alone in my car and listened to the playback. Her laughter, soft murmurs, and effortless dishonesty filled the air. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. What I felt was emptier than either, detached. That evening I came home with a bouquet. She blinked, confused. "What's this?" "For us," I replied. She smiled warmly. "You're being sweet." I kissed her gently and whispered, "You deserve the world." And I meant it. She was about to receive everything she had earned. In the following week, I secured a lawyer. I submitted quiet filings. Select accounts were frozen. I liquidated my motorcycle, stashing the proceeds where she wouldn't think to look. But this was just the surface. I reached out to Elena, Logan's wife. We met at a tiny cafe near the courthouse. She didn't even sit before asking, "What's going on?" I slid a small envelope across the table. She raised an eyebrow. "What is this?" "Proof," I said, "of who your husband really is." Inside were time-stamped photos, duplicate room keys, and a handwritten note from Alyssa that read, "Just us, always." Elena didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stared at me and asked, "Are you trying to ruin them?" I shook my head. "Number, I want to set them loose. Let them be together, in the open." A thin smile formed on her lips. "Then let's make it quiet. Clean." We began to strategize. At work, I played the part. I laughed at Logan's jokes. I invited him over for drinks. "Boys' night," I said. He accepted without hesitation. We picked Friday. I told Alyssa I'd be working late, no need to wait up. That was true, just not complete. I wasn't at the office. I was with Elena, putting the final touches on our plan. Logan received a note, my handwriting, forged, with a reservation at Alyssa's favorite restaurant. A surprise birthday dinner, it claimed. At the same time, I asked Alyssa to meet me there to talk about us. They both showed. They weren't prepared to see each other, and certainly not Elena and me, hand in hand, walking in behind them. Alyssa froze. Logan turned white. "Please," I said calmly, "take a seat." Elena dropped a stack of receipts onto the table. "You forgot these last time," she said. Alyssa's eyes welled. "Caleb, please let me explain." "I'm sure you have plenty to say," I said. "But tonight I don't need reasons." I hit play on my phone. Alyssa's voice filled the room, intimate, giggling, speaking of Logan's touch, certain I'd never suspect. The restaurant went silent. People looked up from their meals. I let the audio run for 30 seconds before stopping it. Elena and I turned and walked out. We didn't glance back. That night I finalized the end of our marriage. But justice? That was just beginning. Alyssa moved out within the week. I never told her to leave. She packed her things like someone escaping a crime scene, hands shaking, silent. She paused briefly over a framed photo of us from Jackson Hole, then quietly set it down. She never asked me to forgive her. Logan, surprisingly, lingered. Elena let him stay for a couple of weeks before locking him out for good. At work, he became a shell, showing up late, skipping conversations, shrinking in meetings. He was learning, slowly and painfully, that secrets collect interest. But I wasn't finished. They believed the exposure was the worst of it. They were wrong. Silence was sharper and far more lasting. As Alyssa sent me apology-filled texts that I ignored, I started dismantling the rest of her world. She worked in public relations, a field built on appearances. So I fed her industry what it feared most: uncertainty. Jordan helped leak curated screenshots of her messages with Logan, strategically chosen, shared not with gossip sites, but in the professional forums where she once thrived. Just enough to raise eyebrows. Whispers began, blurred lines, ethical lapses, poor judgment. Clients pulled back. Her name dropped off event panels, meetings dried up. She went from leading the room to scribbling minutes. Her voice became decoration. Then came Logan's descent. I knew his soft points: pride, gambling, insecurity. He had a secret addiction to online poker, not criminal, just expensive. Jordan and I created a fake high-stakes platform. Logan received an invite from an anonymous profile. He jumped in. By the end of the first weekend, he was 10,000 down. The next, 5 more. By the time he figured out he was playing against scripted bots and paid shills, his account was empty. Meanwhile, I began to write. Alyssa once told me I had a gift with words, used to ask for help polishing her proposals. So I turned that talent elsewhere. I started documenting everything: the betrayal, the retaliation, the rebuilding. Not as a sob story, but as a manual. Working title: How to Rebuild When They Break You. When I finished the first draft, I no longer recognized the man from the beginning. I wasn't a victim anymore. I had forged something stronger in the aftermath. And then, unexpectedly, came Harper. We met in a support group, not for loss through death, but through betrayal. She was composed, intelligent, and beautiful in the way that comes from no longer needing to impress anyone. Her husband had cheated after 6 years. They had a child. He told her it just happened. In the beginning, we barely spoke, just shared glances, then coffee, then lunch, then drives filled with silence that somehow felt like conversation. One evening, sitting on a dock beside a frozen lake, she asked, "Do you ever feel like revenge didn't heal you?" I looked at her. "No," I said, "but it stopped the pain from spreading." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Then she kissed me. It wasn't urgent or hungry. It was steady, certain, like a promise without words. We didn't rush into anything. That night we just existed, together. And she reminded me of something important, that Alyssa didn't get to define me, that I was still whole, still alive, still capable of love. And just when I thought it was over, Alyssa made one final move. She sent me an essay, something she either wrote or paid someone to write. She titled it, "The Wound That Made Me Honest," a gutting confession about sorrow, missteps, and the messiness of being human. I never replied. Instead, I forwarded it, anonymously, to the CEO of her firm. The piece went viral without her blessing. Within 48 hours, they let her go. Logan didn't stick around either. He disappeared without noise, disgraced and unemployed. No farewell email. No social media update. Just silence, broken only by voicemails I ignored. One of them said, "You won. I lost everything. Is that what satisfaction feels like to you?" It wasn't satisfaction, but it was release. And release, I discovered, is a tangled thing. When you've spent years living under betrayal's weight, peace doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like vertigo, like waking up in a strange city not knowing where you are. I'd stripped Alyssa and Logan of more than just their careers. I'd exposed them, down to the secrets they thought were safely buried. The blaze had done its work, leveled everything, but clarity didn't come in the aftermath. Just a lingering haze, thick and unmoving. I had expected revenge to steady me, and in some respects it had. But the taste it left was bitter, because once the damage is done and there's no one left to punish, all that remains is what's broken inside you. One evening, I sat across from Harper in her cabin tucked deep in the hills. The wood stove snapped quietly beside us. She wore that old army green sweatshirt, its cuffs worn thin, her knees pulled close, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of peppermint tea. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "about what might have happened if you'd just walked away?" I let out a breath. "I think about it a lot." Her eyes met mine, steady and clear. "But I don't think I could have lived with myself," I said. "Still, maybe I wouldn't feel so splintered now." She leaned into me, resting her head against my chest. "You still have a heart, Caleb," she murmured. "You've just stopped hearing it." I didn't argue. She was right. I'd stopped living. I was strategizing, navigating a war, not a life. And when the person on the other side of that war is someone you once loved, even winning feels like a loss. Then came the call I never expected. A blocked number. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me press answer. "Caleb Warren," came a woman's voice. "Yes. This is Detective Rachel Meade with the Denver Police. I'm calling in regards to Alyssa Warren." My spine straightened. "What happened?" "She was in a car accident last night. No other vehicles were involved. We believe she may have been emotionally unstable." "She's alive?" "She's stable, just some minor injuries, but she specifically asked for you." I didn't want to go, but I went anyway. The hospital room stank of bleach and regret. Alyssa lay in the bed, a faint gash above her brow, her wrist in a soft bandage. When she saw me, her eyes filled. "Caleb," she said, her voice cracked. I stayed by the doorway, arms crossed. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came to see if I could feel anything." She smiled, sadly, knowingly. "You always were honest." I really looked at her then. The spark that once made her magnetic was dulled now. She was hollowed out, but strangely, more real than I'd ever seen her. "Why me?" I asked. "Because there's no one else who would come," she said, eyes shining. We sat in a heavy silence. Then she said the one thing I wasn't ready for. It wasn't love with Logan. It wasn't that. It was impulsive, desperate. I wanted to remember who I used to be, before the dinners, before the sameness, before I vanished inside the routine. I didn't respond. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked. "You were too solid," she said, "too kind. I started believing I didn't deserve that. That if you really knew the broken pieces of me, you'd leave. Logan already knew those versions, the ones I'd buried." "So you chose betrayal?" "I did," she admitted without flinching, "and I paid for it. Everything's gone." "Not everything," I said. "You still carry the guilt." She turned her face away. Before I left, she asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" I stood motionless, calm. "No," I said, "but I don't love you anymore either." And then I turned and walked out. Every step away felt like I might collapse. I wanted to hate her. I needed that clarity. But the raw truth she shared cracked something inside me I thought I'd sealed shut. That night, I went back to Harper's. She sat curled by the fire, book in hand, blanket over her legs. She looked up, reading my face before I spoke. "I saw her," I said. She didn't press. She didn't have to. "She told me everything," I added, sinking beside her, resting my head in her lap. "I'm so tired, Harper. I scorched everything, and I'm still hollow." Her fingers threaded gently through my hair. And then, in a whisper, "Maybe it's time to stop burning it all down and start building something new." Those words anchored in me. Spring came quietly. The snow receded, revealing rivers along the pavement cracks. The cold softened. And somewhere deep inside me, something began to quiet. Not peace exactly, but a stillness I hadn't felt in months. I had spent so much energy tearing apart the past, I forgot I could make something different. Harper. She became a kind of mirror I didn't know I needed. She didn't offer solutions. She just stood beside me while I slowly remembered who I was. "You don't have to outrun the past," she told me once. "Just stop letting it be the only thing you talk about." That stayed with me. So I began writing again. Not a vindictive exposé, but something sincere. Maybe memoir. Maybe fiction. I didn't know yet. But I knew I had to write. And this time it wasn't about loss. It was about rediscovery. My days got quieter. I took slow walks, reconnected with my brother, who I'd cut off completely. I even started therapy, reluctantly. But it helped. Because beneath all the pain and vengeance, something deeper had always been festering. Why had this broken me so thoroughly? The answer was buried in the silence. Because it wasn't just about Alyssa's betrayal. It was everything I'd refused to look at. My father's disappearance. My fear of never measuring up. My obsession with control. Her betrayal didn't cause the wound, it just tore the bandage away. One afternoon, Harper handed me a small leather notebook. "What's this?" I asked. "Your next chapter," she said. "Not the one you just closed. The one you haven't written yet." I held it in my hands for a long time. That night, I opened it and wrote the first line. I no longer carry their shame. As for Alyssa, she moved to Portland. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she volunteers now, works with teens, helps nonprofits with branding. Maybe it's redemption, or maybe it's just her way of trying again. I never reached out. I didn't need to. She belonged to a chapter I'd already finished. Logan. Last I heard, he was slinging cocktails at some low-key sports bar just outside of Boulder. He kept his head down. No one back at headquarters even remembered his face. I didn't harbor any anger toward him, but I couldn't muster any goodwill either. Sometimes, the truest form of justice is simply knowing you'll never have to walk alongside someone like that again. Close to a year after the dust had finally settled, Harper and I escaped to the quiet of a secluded cabin tucked deep in the Smoky Mountains. Just the two of us. No ringing phones. No obligations. No ghosts from the past trailing behind us. We settled into the time-worn wooden porch that overlooked an endless ocean of trees. I listened to her breathing slow in the stillness until she turned and softly asked, Do you ever wonder what it would be like to go back to who you were before any of this? I looked at her for a long second before letting a small smile touch my lips. No, I told her. That person didn't think they deserved anything better. She nodded, the kind of nod that comes from knowing. And that person, she said quietly, is never going to lose himself again. She leaned her head on my shoulder and we just sat there. No words, no movement. Just two people who had been broken and who made the conscious choice not to let their cracks become cages. This is where our journey concludes. I truly appreciate hearing your reflections in the comments. Thank you for being part of this. If this story found a place in you, feel free to browse the other videos on the channel. Until we meet again, take care, friend.